Hey friends, it's John. You're on the JRB Tree Climbing channel. It's been a couple years since I showed you this, the Longhorn Agile Friction Hitch. It's been a game changer for me and my team as we tackle all kinds of climbing systems and climbing applications with non-mechanical systems. We can SRT climb on this, we can hitch climb on this, we can use this as an automatically tending friction hitch, and we can use it in DSRT, my preferred method. There's a dedicated page on the website for this, and there's a dedicated playlist. Today, we're going to be talking about optimizing it. Be sure you're familiar with the prior work on this and how to tie it. By optimizing it, what I mean is when we take a friction hitch and we tie it, well, these loops are going to be a certain length based on how we tied it. Now, we don't want to have to untie it if we want it to be, these loops to be longer or more compact. And what I've settled on is an optimal geometry. So if you check the length specifications table on the page for the Longhorn Agile Hitch, you'll see all kinds of combinations for different rope diameter, core diameter, and the number of wraps, which is typically 5. On certain combinations, I've got a preferred option indicated with the $sign. You can just remember that. It's money. This is a great combination. These loops aren't too long and they're not too short, and I can transform this into a compact version. I can configure this so that these loops don't accidentally come undone and my friction hitch doesn't fall off my rope in transport. And lastly, I can configure them in a manner such that in a DSRT climb, the two hitches are going to stay a little small distance away from one another, and that's going to help us climb. So all of that detail I'm going to show you in the lab, but let me just give you an idea what I'm talking about. I got gloves on, remember? I'm going to put my Longhorn Agile each side into my bridge. With my gloves on, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to move them, even though I'm on a very narrow tree crotch and these two lines are very close to one another. They're very close to one another, but by making sure there's a little separation on my carabiner, I can climb with ease. Watch this. I'm going to take my two fingers, my middle finger and forefinger, make the peace sign, and I'm going to put that on top of my carabiner. And watch, I can just push these up. I can just push them up. DSRT can be that easy. Don't forget, we didn't have to tie any knots in order to enable this climb. Okay, I'm going to take you into the lab and show you exactly what I mean. Okay, so here I have 3 Longhorn Agile hitches. They're all identical in the sense that they were all created with 6mm cord on 9.5mm rope. On the right, I've got what I call the compact version. Got a dedicated video on how to tie the compact version, along with length specifications. How much cord do I need? I've got that at 72 inches of cord to create this. Here I've got one that was created with 78 inches of cord, and its loops are a little longer. They're about 2.5 inches long. And here is one that you just saw me climb on. This was created with 80 inches, and these loops are 3 inches and change. And this is my preferred length option for this. Let me explain why. The first issue that we have with the Longhorn Agile is that it's easily destabilized. So if you have this on your line and you're walking around the woods, there's nothing to prevent this loop from popping out. Now you've got a problem. And you might not catch it when you get to the woods. You might clip into this. So we need to make sure that's stable. And I thought that I was going to have a solution for that I would like. But here's some of the solutions. One solution is, well, just leave a carabiner on there. Well, that's just not always practical. We don't always want to do so, and sometimes we're going to pop that off. Here's another solution. Just take a mini rigging carabiner. This is the Micro Raider from Omega Pacific, and leave that on there. Well, I tried that too, and I didn't like that. Sometimes I dropped it, sometimes it would clink. I didn't like it. Here's an option. Here's a tiny little cable tie. I tried that. I didn't like it because sometimes we need to take our friction hitches off. Now you're whipping out a knife, and what if you cut yourself, or what if you nick the cord? And here's an option that I thought I was really going to like. Now this one's on a little longer, but here is a slipped overhand bend. And I just experienced this last week climbing on one of my systems. When you get down from a climb and you're pulling your rope out of the tree and it's freezing cold in winter conditions and your fingers don't even work very well, if that crotch is tight and you need to remove your friction hitch to get it out of the crotch, the last thing you want to do is this. Your fingers may not work well enough to do so. And this paracord, well, sometimes it just gets in the way. It'll fall into your carabiner or prevent it from opening. So I don't like that option. But this hitch, you know, it can be destabilized. And so here's what I've arrived at. Now this might look the same. This was tied with 80 inches, just 2 inches more. But these loops down the bottom are just big enough where I haven't, and I've been testing quite a bit, I haven't had these pop off. And if in transport we wanted to make sure that they wouldn't pop off, let's say, you know, you don't put your rope in a bag like I don't, I just wear it on my back. If you absolutely wanted to make sure that this wouldn't pop off, what we can do is we can make this loop, we can make that a little longer. Make it a little longer, and we could tuck it in the other one. Now it's really not going anywhere. And by the way, I'm going to point this out while we're here, because if I make this loop really small, just big enough to get this through, well, I'm not exactly sure what to call this, but this is a pretty good friction hitch. This is a Longhorn Agile, but it's only got one loop exposed, and we can climb on this. It's just not quite as performant. But for DSRT, this works fine. This works fine. But back to the original program. Well, another issue I have is, well, when climbing, sometimes I do want it really compact. I want it that way when I'm hitch climbing, but when I'm executing SRT or DSRT, I like these to be a few inches long to give me a little bit of room to place my hand over this and then shove it up. And when I'm climbing with DSRT, so here's a DSRT system, a little tighter. Here is the friction hitch on the right side of my DSRT system. This was tied in the right-handed or Z chirality. Here's the hitch on the left side of my DSRT system. This was tied with left-handed or S chirality. When I rig my DSRT system, so this is the way you would see it when you first tied it, I reorient these. I put them this way because I'm looking at the back side, because my garter hitch is on the outside and this is pulling towards me. So I orient them both basically backwards, so I'm looking at the back side. And now the unstable loop is in the middle. That's the one I lengthen. I lengthen it to be about double the size on both of them. And I'm just going to do this once and then leave it that way again, because most of my climbs are DSRT. And that's the way the system will be. When I rig it up into the tree, and now I've got my bridge carabiner, I engage the loop on the right. I create a girth hitch here with this loop only on one side. I create a girth hitch here, and then through the other side. And if you get those lengths right, what we've done there, by creating a girth hitch with each of these guys, those girth hitches, they create 6 millimeters plus 6 millimeters, which is 12 millimeters, which is over a centimeter of space here, and they kind of force these hitches apart, and they make it easier to move. And so when I'm climbing DSRT, I'll just put my hand here over the whole thing and shove this up. As it gets further and further up in the tree and these are approaching the crotch, sometimes I'll put my finger between them, but still no problem. And then lastly, if I'm using a double shove, I just grab these, I put my fingers over the ears like this and shove those up, and it works great every time. So this is my preferred method. Let's see it again. This is my bridge carabiner. These girth hitches, you can make them either way. So I flip that one up. I can flip this one up the other way. That may have an advantage in that it really keeps these at a 90-degree angle and ensures that they're separate. But that's it. That's it. And lastly, if I need an extra wrap, I've got enough length to do so. I will tie one of these for you now with the starting inner loop of 18.5 inches, but if I want to create a 6-wrap Longhorn Agile, there's adequate length to do so. Okay, let me tie one from scratch. Okay, here I've got a length of TRC, Sterling 6mm TRC that I just cut at 80 inches. I actually always cut them about a ½ inch longer. And I'm going to apply my adhesive shrink wrap tubing to the end of that. Just watch that tighten up. And don't be surprised that you've got to let this cool longer than you think. I'll be back in a few seconds. Okay, so here's my cord. As per the length specifications on the page for the Longhorn Agile Hitch, I need a 12-inch. I make them 12 1/4 since I have an extra. So this point here that I'm pinching with my left hand, that is exactly 12 1/4 inches, or say 12 inches. And when I want to tie a Longhorn hitch, see my video tying the Longhorn hitch and Longhorn loop, I hold that position. So this is just a review. I'm going to go at normal speed here. See the prior video on tying the Longhorn loop. Starting with the loop on my right, I go around 360 degrees and hold it in that position. Starting with now the loop on my left, I go around and over that one 360 degrees. Hold their positions, and now take this loop, this end up and through, the one on the right, around the back and over the other one. So at this point they've both been over the other once and under the other once. And now both of these shoot up through here. It's not quite normal speed, I'm a little quicker. All right, so now we pull these out, pull them out while I'm kind of working this. It's important to get this set appropriately. I'll lengthen it. Now I got to pull on the back side. Pull on all 4 strands repeatedly until this brand new cord, right? We want to make sure that we got this nice and tight. So I've got this, and I can tell it's tight because when I pull on these, I feel the resistance. Great. And these ends are just a little over 3 inches long. Okay, now we're going to tie a Longhorn Agile hitch on this strand, and I'll tie it in the right-handed chirality. According to the length specifications, we need an 18.5 inch loop. So refer to the video tying the Longhorn Agile hitch. I'm going to lengthen this loop to be exactly 18.5 inches. I don't use my measuring stick for this. You see my video on the human measuring stick, and I just did it. I can measure it with my pinky in this fashion, and I know I've got 18.5 inches. And then I get started. Lay it over. Again, this is just a review. We're going pretty quick here. See the prior video on tying the Longhorn Agile. Around the back once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. And I've got, pretty good tension there. And as it goes around the 5th time, I go I let that go horizontal because that's the way this is going to wind up. And then down, across where I started, around the back. It doesn't really matter. If you find your cord kind of wanting to twist one way or the other, it doesn't really matter if you go this way or that way. It really doesn't matter. Performance is the same. I know I did well if you've got just an aperture here to get your finger through. And I lengthen this loop, put this in. And these two borrow from one another. Let's get that set. Put a carabiner here. Okay, let's measure these loops. It should be 3 inches and change. It says 3 on the website. It's about 3 1/4, 3 1/2. I then create my girth hitch here, just making sure I can get this thing in a compact form. Girth hitch here. You know, we probably could get away with just an inch less cord, but why fight it? Just a tiny bit of slack there makes this all easier. Remember, we got to be able to do this with gloves on. And that's the mirror image of this guy, and it's identical to the one that you saw moments ago. Okay, so this wasn't a knot tying video. This was about the length. So on the website, on the page for the Longhorn Agile Hitch, you're going to see a long table of specs. And the one that I consider to be preferred, optimal, money, that's the one with the $ on it. That's my preferred recommendation for a hitch that you can tie, and you can do just about anything with it. You can make sure it's stable. Let's make this one super stable. You can even transform it into a single loop variant. You can change the length of these loops as we just demonstrated. And for extra credit, don't forget, if you needed a longer friction hitch, for example, you're executing a bypass in a DSRT system and you want longer friction hitch, it's pretty simple to pop this off and transform it into a Longhorn Zenith. 1, 2, 3. The Longhorn Zenith is super easy to tie. You don't have to worry about any detailed length, starting lengths. It's just a little bit more finicky to operate, but if you are familiar with it, now I've got a Longhorn Zenith. And instead of a compact loop that we started with, we can get this compact. We can get those loops to be 3 inches. Well, this loop is about 10 inches. And there are scenarios where we might want to transform our Longhorn Agile into a Longhorn Zenith. We'll save that scenario for the woods. Thanks as always for your support. And again, if this video was a lot of information, it just means that you're not caught up. Refer to the website and refer to the playlist on the Longhorn Agile Friction Hitch. It's extremely versatile, and it has been a game changer. Thank you.